Welcome to the ThunderCast, your Marshall Athletics podcast produced by the fans, for the fans, with your hosts, Russ Livingood and KD Hudnall. We're bringing you the thundering word on the thundering herd each and every week, so keep it right here. The ThunderCast is on the loose. Thanks for downloading another episode of the ThunderCast. Follow us on Twitter at ThunderCast_pod. Marshall representatives for thecollegehuddle.com. That's us, the ThunderCast. You can head on over to thecollegehuddle.com to find the largest network of fan-driven podcasts on the friggin' planet, thecollegehuddle.com. Russ, huge game, another big week as per the norm in the Sun Belt Conference. Another big East Division showdown. Two teams that are currently tied for first place in the Sun Belt East in this young season. It's the Herd and Georgia Southern. Another one of those classic type Southern Conference games, though there's not a whole lot of history between these two teams. Not nearly as much as the Herd and App State, but nonetheless, it's Georgia Southern on the slate. A lot at stake. Definitely tiebreakers, potential postseason implications on this one. So before we get into it all, how about a quick word from our sponsors at Leasure Oliver PLLC?
If you've been hurt in a wreck, call the law firm of Leasure Oliver PLLC. Find them at 304carwreck.com.
All right. It is time for another ComAssist, KY.com Marshall football preview. ComAssist. We coach, you grow. Georgia Southern on the slate for the Herd in this one. It's an away game for Marshall, and you know what? They're wearing the pea pods. They're going all green on the road because it's a whiteout in Statesboro. Georgia Southern also 3-2 on this season, also currently 1-0 in conference. Kind of some mirror images to some things. They've played a marquee opponent in Ole Miss, just as Marshall has played a marquee opponent in Ohio State. Some other similar type games on the slate as well, but I don't think these two teams are as evenly matched as some people would like to think they are, even though the records say they are, and that kind of, I don't see it as much. The game, of course, going down this Saturday, October the 12th at 8 p.m. on ESPNU, so a primetime opportunity for the Herd to showcase what they've got in front of a national audience. This will be the 9th all-time meeting between Marshall and Georgia Southern. Herd owns a 6-2 all-time record, and the Herd has not lost to Georgia Southern since the freaking Reds won the World Series way back in 1990. I don't know why they are talking all this junk like we can't win on the road when we did that 2 years ago in Statesboro. Russ, ESPN Power Index likes Georgia Southern in this, kind of what I would call a coin flip, because Marshall's still a 44.3% chance to win. The Herd is currently minus 1.5 with an over-under of 60.5 if you're into that sort of thing. The line has moved a little bit throughout the week. The over-under went down a point. Marshall went from a 2.5-point favorite to a 1.5-point favorite. But nonetheless, what's your synopsis on this one before I get into those three big questions?
They are not the same. I think when we talk about these numbers here and some of the key places, you're going to realize that they're not the same. You know, records are records, but you're not playing the same circumstances, the same teams, that sort of thing. And I really feel like we are not as close as anybody is given here. 1.5, 2.5 points. I've seen both. I just looked it up. FanDuel still 2.5. Marshall favorite. Feels like at least a touchdown more.
Mm-hmm. Well, look, I'm not going to sit here and tell you they've played nobody, because they have.
They haven't. They have.
So credit to Georgia Southern. They opened the season with Boise State. Boise State is probably the G5 favorite to get the playoff spot at this point. They've got a legitimate Heisman candidate at running back. Then they went on the road to Nevada and got a win against a Mountain West foe who's probably more like a peer type school, almost like the Western Michigan game for us.
Yeah.
So I would point to Boise State and go, okay, that was their Virginia Tech game. And then they played South Carolina State, which was like our Stony Brook game. And then Ole Miss, which was like our Ohio State game. So they have played good competition. And I would like to point out that they went in a basic shootout with Boise State. Yeah, it's week 1, so you don't really know a lot in week 1. I'm not trying to downplay it because Boise's really good. But they put up 45 against Boise State. The problem was they allowed 56. So, it is what it is. So Georgia Southern is a decent team. It just is kind of like who's going to show up. What team's going to show up and say they're going to be hyped for this one? A whiteout, Statesboro, national audience, ESPNU, whole kind of thing. But what do you deduce from that?
Well, I can tell you that as we're talking about individual players, offense, defense, I've got a lot of numbers here, rankings here. Same. I think it would be the best if we trade those off then instead of right now. The overview is what I said earlier. I think they have played a good schedule so far, but I don't feel like they put up the same fight, even though it was a similar score that we did with Ohio State. Nobody else, if you look, has really scored on Ohio State. Mm-hmm. And we did, and we were in danger of hitting 21 in the first half. Mm-hmm. It just seems different. But when you look at these rankings, it just looks like they are not as good as their record shows. They're not as proficient in some areas as their stats show. And I think when we start talking about this, it's going to be kind of glaring that they are not. I'm not calling them a paper tiger. I think they're a good team. Yeah. I'm not saying they're a bad team. I just don't see them being like earlier in the season, people were predicting that they might be the team to beat, in the East Division. And right now they're a favorite on the ESPN index. And I just don't see that.
Yeah. Well, if this game's in Huntington, it's probably not that way.
It won't. This is a basic flip them, pick them on ESPN's part.
All right, so 3 big questions for me. Number 1, and probably the most important, does Braylon Braxton get the start coming off of an SBC Offensive Player of the Week performance?
I don't think so. And I think that their passing defense is suspect, and I think that plays more into Stone Earl. What I do think is that both quarterbacks play. I just don't think that Braxton would be the starter. A little wrinkle that we didn't talk about on our recap of that game, that having the performance that Braxton did when he goes in, now who the hell does a team game plan for?
Yeah.
You've got 2 different styles. Earl is more throwing the ball downfield, and Braxton is just a prototypical dual threat, and he's 6'1", 220 as a dual threat. Look at the way he was finishing those runs. So I don't see him starting because it looks like Earl is the better matchup, but I think that we're going to see both quarterbacks get some really good time in this, and really just like you would bring in a change of pace running back, I think that you're going to see some change of pace quarterback, because I think this is one of those games that it just plays into the strengths that it would make sense for us to do that.
I believe so too. I think you absolutely should play both guys if Stone Earl is in fact healthy, which we're still wondering. We don't know. So I think you do play both guys, unless one guy is just red hot out of the gate, and then why upset the apple cart, right? But it's hard. I would imagine it's hard to go to Braylon and say, hey, we're going with Earl, because especially off of the performance that he put up. But if this is a team concept and these guys are all bought in together, you kind of go, all right, I'm here for whatever my role is, right? And I feel like that's what we have a roster full of guys doing right now.
Yeah.
And one thing we also didn't talk about in that recap, and I've got to talk about this, if this doesn't speak to like development of a quarterback, remember a couple of weeks ago, we talked about if one player got better between Virginia Tech and Ohio State, it was Stone Earl.
Mm-hmm.
Braylon Braxton has to come off the field for one play because his helmet comes off. They put in Earl, and instead of just handing the ball off, they call a pass play. And what does he do? He throws the DB into pass interference. Mm-hmm. That is a beautiful developmental type play by Stone Earl, because you come in for one play, you come right back out, and what you've done is moved your quarterback down 15 yards closer to scoring. Such an underrated play because it was one play and it was a penalty. But, I mean, he threw that. He threw that defender into interference. That's exactly what happened. So, number 2, big question for me. Is the Herd defense in for another big impact plays week? Georgia Southern has allowed 12 sacks on the season, 33. They've given up 33 tackles for loss, 22, allowed 22 passes defended against them, and given up 11 fumbles, 4 of which they've lost. Does this speak to, hey, might be feast again for this Herd defense?
Yes, but they protect the ball very well through the air. They've only thrown 1 interception, the same as us, and they have a lot more attempts than we do on that. So impact plays, I see us getting back there in the backfield. I see us tipping some balls and things like that, maybe forcing a fumble. Hopefully even on a scoop and score off of a sack or something like that, or tackle for loss on the running back, scoop and score. But I don't know that we'll get those interceptions. But we kind of did that against App State, where they had only thrown 3 through the first 4 games, and they threw 2, what could have been more than that, we talked about in that recap, both in dropped interceptions and ones that were reversed due to a holding call in the defensive backfield for pass interference. So I'm going to say yes, but if I'm bullish on anything, it's the sacks. If I'm questionable on anything, it's the interceptions, those plays.
Number 3 big question from KD is, how will Marshall replace the dynamic Elijah Metcalf? Reports are out that he will, quote, miss some time. Yeah. So that obviously means he ain't probably playing this weekend. And, of course, this weekend is all we're concerned about right now. Of course, we want him back as soon as possible. But when they say things like we'll miss some time, obviously you're talking about multiple games. So how does the Herd replace the very dynamic and dangerous Elijah Metcalf?
Well, so you've got 2 options that are going to be taking that spot. Chuck Montgomery, who has a lot of time here, familiarity with Marshall. He came up with the 26-yard touchdown and led us with 2 receptions last week, but also Tyshawn Doc Chapman. And, he is just due like one of these breakout performances. We saw him do it in the air raid with North Carolina down there. He is probably one of the fastest. Well, I know he's one of the fastest, but up there in maybe the top 3 on the offense. And I look for both of those guys to get more chances and different style than Metcalf, but I think that we can effectively work those guys in and not miss too big of a beat.
Yeah. All right. I dig that. I mean, we were both calling for Chuck Montgomery to have a big year this year. He's kind of been buried in the depth chart a little bit, broke out a little bit last week. A special shout out to him because he was tackled up around the neck twice last week. Once called for penalty, the other was not. And then then what did he do in response to those 2 tackles up around the neck? He shoots down the seam for a beautiful touchdown. So how you like that, App State? All right, let's talk about some players to look out for on this Georgia Southern offense. Of course, it starts with quarterback J.C. French, 6'1", 210. He's a sophomore, 112 out of 177 for 1,122 yards on the season, 7 touchdowns versus just 1 interception. I mentioned he's been sacked 12 times. Not much of a runner. He's got a handful of carries, maybe like 10, 12 carries for 48 yards. But, of course, the sacks come off of that quite a bit. I don't know, whatever. But it's
46 carries. It's actually a lot.
Okay, it's 46 carries. I was thinking it was 48 yards.
Yeah, no, he's the second leading as far as attempts on the team. So we do have to watch for that.
Okay. But still, if you're living in the backfield, anyway. Running back Jalen White, a name that should be familiar to Herd fans. He's been really good for a number of years. 6'1", 220 senior, 60 carries on the year, 235 yards, 7 touchdowns on the ground, 3.9 yards per carry. And his counterpart, running back O.J. Arnold, 5'10", 190. He's a junior. Half as many carries, but almost the same production. Just 29 carries on the season, 201 yards. He's also found the end zone 3 more times. A lot of rushing touchdowns for this Georgia Southern team. 6.9 yards per carry for Arnold. Then a trio of wide receivers. Derwin Burgess Jr., 5'11", 190. He's a senior. 19 catches, 245 yards, leads the team. And a touchdown, good for 12.9 yards per reception. Wide receiver Dalen Cobb, 5'10", 195 junior, 20 receptions, leads the team for 219 yards and 2 touchdowns, leads the team. 10.9 yards per reception. Wide receiver Josh Dallas, 6'2", 200. He's a sophomore, 16 receptions for 191 yards and a touchdown. Good for 11.9 yards per reception. So they spread it around a good bit. Lots of guys get a fair amount of yards, and all of them have found the end zone. So a little familiar to what Marshall does, right? The running game is a little bit different, whereas, we've got guys that pile up yards. We're not being super successful on the ground as far as running back touchdowns go, where these guys are. All in all, this Georgia Southern offense is racking up 31.6 points per game, which is good for 50th in the country. Russ, notes on the Georgia Southern offense?
Well, we are very familiar with Derwin Burgess Jr. He had the most receptions against us in last year's game in 2022. He didn't play. I think that might have been the only game he missed. But he can get after it. He can make the catches. But they have – Jalen White did a great job against us, I think, the last 2 years. But – he's just been a touchdown machine. He's not been able to really do much. He had a breakout game in the last game against Georgia State and pretty much doubled his yards production on the year. But O.J. Arnold, 29 carries for 201, 6.9 average, like you mentioned. But he's there out of the backfield too. 10 receptions. One of 7 people in double figures catching the ball. 10 receptions, 59 yards, and a touchdown there too. I listened to the podcast for the Georgia Southern team, and they were talking about giving more carries to O.J. Arnold because other than the touchdowns that are coming from Jalen White, O.J. Arnold is just putting up those yards per carry, yards per catch that your premier running back would be. So we've got to watch for that there may be a shift and give him more carries. If you look at this, J.C. French, 7 touchdowns, only 1 interception, 63.3 completion percentage for 1,122 yards. I mentioned 7 different players in double figures already with receptions. But if you had to guess right now, and that's a loaded question, you'll probably know where I'm going with this, who has the most, Marshall or Georgia Southern, given those stats, who has the most yards per completion?
Oh, I don't know. I'm not. I can't play. I don't know stats that well, man.
Would you say that by looking at this, they have a prolific passing attack?
Not really. I mean, we just got done playing a quarterback that had over 1,200 yards going into our game through 4 games. And we're talking about a quarterback now through 5 games that had fewer yards than the App State quarterback a game ago. So I wouldn't call it prolific. It's kind of middle of the pack.
Well, how about they're 121st out of 133 in yards per completion? And it's 63.3%. They've got a good completion percentage. It's not like they're, completing 40% of their passes. It's just not as dynamic as you think. They've got, 5 games, 1,100 yards, like you're talking, but that seems to be their bread and butter this year is their passing attack. yeah, they've scored on the ground with Jalen White quite a bit, but they're not putting up a lot of yards to do that.
Yeah. And let's also talk about this. What's that sound like to you? That sounds like a lot of short passes, right? And who's the pass game coordinator down there for Georgia Southern? It's Clint Trickett, the guy that was our OC last year. What infuriated fans is that's all we saw was short pass, short pass, short pass. We wouldn't stretch the field. So you don't think there's a little bit of intimate knowledge about what's going on, at least from a pass game standpoint, with the Georgia Southern Eagles this year? Of course there is, because our OC from last year is down there. It's not surprising to hear that correlation of stats with who's calling the plays down there.
Now, they do have some chunk plays and things like that, and it is not exactly how we were throwing last year and how they're throwing. It is different, but it shocked me that they were that low on yards per completion. And, I mean, it's a full yard below us. I mean, we're up, I think, near 36, 37 spots higher than them.
So when you look at overall rankings of just rush offense and pass offense and total offense versus what Marshall does, it looks pretty even as far as the rankings go. There's not this glaring, one's way better versus one's way worse. I can't tell you that this Eagles offense has a marked advantage anywhere. Okay. You're talking about the number 67 pass offense in total pass yards per game, right? Middle of the pack, right? Well, Marshall's the 52 ranked pass defense. So a little bit better than middle of the pack. Their rush offense is 104, and only 124 yards per game. Marshall is 112 in rush defense, allowing 190. Now that's skewed quite a bit by the massive game against Ohio State, and they had pretty good game in Virginia Tech as well.
Yeah.
And then their total offense for Georgia Southern, 94th, just 358 yards per game. Marshall's total defense is 95th. So you see what I'm saying? It's kind of getting 390 yards. Everything's falling right into place. Marshall's scoring defense 28 points per game. Georgia Southern scoring 31.5 points per game. But there's not this, hey, we're the number 15 pass offense like we just saw with App State going up against a middle of the pack pass defense. It's just not there for them. So defensively is really where you start to see it get away. But let's talk about these players in this ComAssist KY Marshall football preview. Linebacker Marcus Watson Trent, 5'11", 225-pound senior, leads the team with 45 total tackles, 21 solo, and 2 forced fumbles. A couple of DBs, and then we'll round it out with another linebacker. DB Chance Gamble, man, put a circle around this dude. He is kind of like everything for them. 6'2", 180-pound junior, 25 total tackles, 18 solo, 3 passes defended, 2 interceptions, 1 forced fumble, and a fumble recovery. Holy crap. Figure out where that dude's at. And then DB TJ Smith, 5'9", 180-pound senior, also 25 tackles, 14 solo, and he adds an interception. And then we'll round it out with linebacker Devon Gilmore, 6'2", 250 as a linebacker. He's a senior, 23 total tackles, 15 solo. Impact plays for this Eagles defense, just 4 total sacks on the year through 5 games, 16 passes defended, 6 interceptions, looks nice, including a pick 6 and 3 forced fumbles and a fumble recovery. What do you think about this Eagles defense, though?
How much time you got? Because let me run down this. A couple of these will be not their ranking. It'll be how from the bottom, how close to the bottom they are. Georgia Southern is 22nd worst in scoring allowed with 32 points a game. They're 5th worst in yards allowed with nearly 500, 491.8. They're 5th worst in passing yards allowed, 300.2. And that's why I said you'd probably see Stone Earl going up against them. But you would think, okay, well, they're bad against the pass. Maybe they're not as bad against the rush. No, 20th worst in rushing yards allowed with 191.6. They're tied for 95th in sacks. They've given up 12. That's 2.4 a game. The one place that I said they've been doing great, they're tied for 4th best with only allowing 1 interception, which, by the way, Marshall is one of the teams they're tied with, of course. They are 30 out of 70, 42.9 on third down conversion. That's not bad. It's not great. They're 4 out of 5 on fourth down conversions, and we just had a major problem with that. So that's something to watch. And they are 7th worst in third down conversions allowed at 47.7. So I threw in a couple of offensive things there in my stats, but most of these are how bad they are on defensive rankings. They're not good at defending the run. They're not good at defending the pass. They give up a lot of yards. They give up a lot of points. They are one of the worst defenses in not just the Sun Belt, but in college football right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope that their fans are not listening to this and thinking that I'm just crapping all over them, but these are the rankings. They are what they are.
Yeah.
And I think that if they are looking objectively, they'll say, yeah, we could probably have another win if we hadn't have been so bad on defense, or maybe we would have won more convincingly if we hadn't been so bad on defense. But they're giving up nearly 500 yards a game.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what so just like I was talking about the Georgia Southern offense not having a glaring mismatch against this Herd defense, there is a glaring mismatch in particular against this from this Georgia Southern defense and the Herd offense. And it lies in the rush game, right? The 114th ranked rush defense of Georgia Southern, allowing 191.6 yards per game, is going to face the number 27 in the country rush offense for the Marshall University Thundering Herd at over 200 yards a game at 202. So that's why I really ask, hey, does Braylon Braxton maybe get the start because of that glaring mismatch right there? I got no problem with Stoneor getting the start, obviously, because like you mentioned, they're kind of porous against the pass as well. And
it's worst in the country.
And it looks like you might have the luxury of going, okay, how do we want to play this game? Do we want to try to just run the ball all day? And we've been doing a great job of protecting the football. We've seen some fumbles, but it's been on exchanges and things like that. Of course, Earl had the fumble on the big hit a couple of games ago, but you're going to have that. By and large, we're doing a great job of protecting the football. So you think, all right, do you just want to shorten the game, keep the clock running, run the football? They can't seem to stop the damn thing anyway. Or do you want to try to see if you can air it out a little bit and take some chances? Here's the problem. If I'm Georgia Southern, I look at Marshall and I go, okay, Stoneor can pass and run the ball. Well, Braylon Braxton can pass and run the ball, right? Neither one of them I would consider a gunslinger quarterback, and neither one of them I would consider a run-first quarterback. They can both do both things well. Mm-hmm. So this can be interesting for Marshall. And then you're talking about them allowing 32 points per game. You mentioned that's 113th in the country. Marshall's scoring 30 a game. So we're right on our averages. And when you toss in that big mismatch, Marshall could easily top 40 in this game. This could be another 40-plus point performance. I'm not saying that it will be. I'm just saying it could be. There's mismatches there to exploit. And it ain't just in one phase of the game. Place kicker for the Eagles, Gavin Stewart, 5'11", 180-pound senior, 6 of 7 on field goals with a long of 53, 18 of 18 on extra points. So a good weapon they've got in their pocket there. How about some keys to victory in this ComAssistKY.com Marshall football preview?
I've got 4. How many do you have?
Same. I try to always have 4.
All right. All the aggressiveness at defensive back for all those pass deflections and interceptions with much less penalties. We were flying around everywhere, made some great plays. We just got so aggressive that we got some penalties and allowed them to extend drives. So I want us to maintain that, but I want us to, easier said than done, prevent all those penalties.
Yeah, I can dig that. It's hard to tell a guy, hey, play how you're playing, but just dial it back a little bit.
Yeah.
I like how these guys are playing. J.J. Roberts is playing wide freaking open, and I'm here for it. I'm here for it. I'm willing to eat a penalty or two because that guy's going to help me more than he's going to hurt me. right? And you're right. There's a couple of times that Marshall was flagged for a PI or something like that, and I didn't see it. It was probably a legit call. It just wasn't as egregious as some of the calls that weren't called.
Sure.
Against or in our favor, however you want to look at it, when we were on offense. So we're still probably committing those infractions. It's like, man, just come on. But I'm willing to let these guys fly around and do what they want to do, because at the end of the day, it's not killing us right now. And until it kills us, I'm willing to take my chances that it won't. You know what I mean? I don't know if that's the dangerous game to play. I'm sure it is. But I'm willing to play that game because I like how JJ plays. I like how Green McKnight plays, and Jacoby is doing a great job. Josh Moten is doing a freaking great job. There's just a lot of guys that are making a lot of plays. My number one key to victory is play the mismatch. I just talked about it. Run the football. You're talking about the 114th ranked rush defense versus the number 27 ranked rush offense. This really says several guys can have a big day. I mean, it says several guys. I didn't see 140 yards from my quarterback last week, but it happened. I was expecting a big day from my running back. I got a so-so yardage day from my running back, but he was impactful. 2 touchdowns, 1 through the air, 1 on the ground, broke the big long run like we always like to see. Long first downs, hard yards on short yardage situations. They had collectively, that running back room had a great game, and several guys can have a big game in this one, and the quarterbacks too can both stack yardage. What's your number 2?
We need to make 3rd and 4th down stops. Marshall has given up an astounding 13 for 16, 81.2% on 4th down. Georgia Southern is, like I mentioned, 4 out of 5, 80% on 4th down. So that right there is a bad spot for us. We have given it up all year long, and they have gotten them pretty much all year long. The good news is Marshall only gives up first downs 30.1% of the time, and on 3rd down, 22 out of 73, and that's good for 16th in the nation. So again, I said they're not like horrible, they're not good, kind of middle of the road at 43% on 3rd down, but we need to stop them on 3rd and 4th in this game.
Yeah, I think this is a couple of things that are factoring into that, right? Number one, you're probably going for it on 4th down because you're behind. Number 2, you're probably just finding yourself in that no man's land on the field, and maybe you don't have as much confidence in your kicker. Remember, Michael Hughes was injured for App State, absolute weapon. He didn't play. Maybe if he's not injured, they don't go for it on 4th down a couple of times. And maybe this Georgia Southern kicker, they're like, hey, you know what? We like our chances with him from longer yardage, and maybe they give it a shot or two before they start going for it. So I like the stat. Obviously, I like the stat, but it just gives me a little comfort in knowing like we probably have a sizable lead if you're continually going for it on 4th down. But
Steve Cotton brought that up, the different times that people have gotten at least 6 out of 6 4th downs against us. We won all of those games, and the reason they kept going for it, obviously, they were behind and they needed to go for it on 4th down. Yeah,
but still a good stat nonetheless. If something clicks and they go, you know what? We'll just be in 4 down territory until they stop us. That's not a game I want to play, right? Number 2 for me is pin them damn ears back. You're talking about 12 sacks allowed in 5 games. That's a little over 2 a game. We are kind of on fire right now from a defensive line perspective. They played really great against Western Michigan despite not getting a sack. They were still impactful, but they played lights out against App State, nearly doubling the sack total, actually doubling the sack total from the entire season for the Mountaineers in that game. I think you got to pin your ears back and make them beat you. Nobody seems to have an answer for Mike Green for the entirety of a game, with the exception of a couple of really good jobs by Western Michigan offensive linemen. But still in that game, Jabari Ishmael made the big play, so he seized his moment. I think you just got to come back, pin your ears back, and go after this quarterback, man.
They kept running the holding play. Was the only way to get him.
That's true.
Yeah.
That one always works unless it gets flagged. But what's your number 3?
Number 3 for me is bend but don't break. Georgia Southern is 19 out of 20 in the red zone with 10 passing touchdowns, 6 rushing touchdowns, 3 field goals. And we talked about before they get in the red zone, the guy has a long of 53, 6 out of 7 on the year. They got a really good kicker. Marshall has given up 12 out of 13 red zone attempts. They've given up a score, 8 through the air, 3 on the ground, and 1 is a field goal. So right now, that's not a major plus for us. It's a negative. We haven't been defending the red zone, and they've been kind of crushing it in the red zone.
Yeah,
Jalen White especially with those short runs once we get down there. So we really need to clean that up.
The one time that we held the opponent out of the end zone was the game ender, basically, against Western Michigan. Remember, they was like a 7-minute drive. They got nothing out of it.
Yeah.
And that led to the victory. So that's a trend that needs to stop. We thought, okay, if App's going to move it between the 20s and we clamp down and they won't, we keep them out of the end zone, we'll be fine. Well, we weren't able to do that. Luckily, we just kept scoring. And I don't want to get into a game where we need to keep scoring in order to make up for defensive deficiencies. Number 3 for me is keep it rolling. Keep it rolling. Only 2 turnovers all year for this Herd team. 41% on third down doesn't blow you out of the water, but it does get the job done quite a bit. Only 5 sacks allowed by this offensive line all season, just 48 penalty yards per game, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Let's keep these trends rolling. These are things that win football games for you and allow you to be more successful more often because you're not running that 1st and 20 all of the time. Yeah. So all these things that kind of add up to successes, let's keep all those trends going and just keep it rolling. One more game. We'll take it one Saturday at a time, one game at a time.
Number 4 for me is keep up the offensive onslaught. And we did a great job of that in limited touches last week. So I need us to keep doing that because their defense gives up yards and points. So we just need to keep the hammer down.
Yeah, that's fair. My 4th key to victory is something that we have already talked about many, many times, and I think if you play both quarterbacks, you have to play both quarterbacks unless whoever gets the start is just red hot out of the gate and you don't have a reason to change. I think you make them guess. You just make them keep guessing. You plan for 2 quarterbacks. You don't know who you're going to get, who's going to, and even if you do think you're going to get one quarterback to start, you don't know when or if or how often you're going to be making those switches, right? I think you have to do that. I think most of the time I feel like if you've got 2 quarterbacks, you've got no quarterbacks. And then in this particular circumstance against this particular matchup, I think if you got 2 quarterbacks, you got 2 quarterbacks. Yeah. And that's a good problem to have. Mm-hmm. Russ, how about an MVP for this game against the Georgia Southern Eagles in prime time on ESPNU?
They give up 12 sacks so far coming in. Mike Green is right up there amongst the sack leaders. I look for him to have a huge impact on this game. I'm going with Mike Green.
Always trying to do one offense and one defense. I echo what you're saying 1,000-fold. It is Mike Green on the defensive side of the football. I love that. I cannot get past this rush defense, rush offense mismatch for the Herd. Give me A.J. Turner this week. I thought he would have the big game last week. I called it. He didn't have it. Braylon Braxton outshadowed him from a yardage and a touchdown standpoint. I think it's A.J. Turner this week with a big-time supporting role from Jordan Houston. I think he's going to have himself about 70, 75, 80-yard day. I like Turner to get about $120 and a couple of touches in this one. He's my guy on the offensive side of the ball. Do you have a ComAssistKY.com score prediction, Russ?
I do. I'm going 38-31. I look for us to still give up points and still try to get that dialed in to where we can – get everything going where we have an offensive onslaught, but we're also being very stingy on the scoreboard. So 38-31 Herd.
All right. I like it. We're really similar this week on offense. In fact, exact same. I think 38, give me 21, though, for this Herd defense. I think a couple of turnovers are going to pop up and thwart some drives. Maybe just be that air out of the stadium type thing to where it takes them a drive or two to get things going again, and you just start to run out of time at the wrong time in the game. This one needs to be a little bit more convincing than App State. I mean, a 50 burger is going to be pretty convincing anyway. it starts to drown out that higher point total, allowing 37, whatever. But 38-21, I think, is the type of road win that Charles Huff and this team needs to get to put the remainder of the Sun Belt on notice. Like, hey, this Herd team is for real. Any final words in this one?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that as I was going through the concourse to go through the tunnel to my seats at the start of the game last week, who did I turn around and see? But he had a ComAssist KY logo on his shirt, but also on his hat. It was Larry Nightardy, and it was great to see him. I turned around, we spoke for a little bit, and it's great to have him on board here. Larry's done what he does for a long time. And if you or your business need to take it to the next level, you need a coach, you need to crush these goals, you need to surpass the goals that you set for yourself, give Larry a call. When you're calling ComAssist or going to their website, you're not worried about who in the corporation am I going to get this time. You're getting Larry. So give ComAssist a call and let them do it for you. Larry, thanks for sponsoring all these previews.
Yeah, we absolutely thank ComAssist KY for sponsoring the Marshall football game previews this season. Hopefully, the relationship between us and ComAssist will continue, and we will be able to provide some value for them to where they want to continue a partnership with us. And I would like to say this is a great time to say, if you are a business owner and would like to get involved with the ThunderCast and sponsorship opportunities and other opportunities, please give us a shout. You can email us at thundercast_pod@gmail.com, DM us on Twitter or Instagram or Russ over on Facebook or wherever you are. We probably are. We make it really easy, and I've got a feeling that there is something that we can do to collectively benefit both your business, the show, and Herd fans at large. Russ, I'd like to say that the game is over and Coastal Carolina is no longer in a tie for first place in the Sun Belt East Division. James Madison has absolutely throttled Coastal Carolina 39-7. So this one now will be for sole possession currently in the Sun Belt East Division. Look out, man. This game just got more important. The last thing I would like to say is if you're looking for some fresh Herd gear and something that is not just go down to Glenn's and pick it off the rack of what they've got, the Marshall University Alumni Association has their fall store available. Their BSN team store is available for the next 7 days. Now, remember, this is Thursday evening, October 10th, when you're hearing this. So you probably need to safely order before October 16th to get the goods on some of these clothes. And, man, I'm looking at the store right now. It is sweet. They have chosen for their fall catalog the 1971 Buffalo logo on their primary, which is obviously I love. There's some great selections of North Face gear, Nike gear. There's even a couple of Jordan brand items in there. So, hey, this is some sweet, sweet stuff. I'll try to link that in the description of this episode, but I would give it a look-see, and prices are not that bad, man. Like, versus walking into a store and what you would pay in a store on some of these items. And plus, you're going to benefit the Marshall University Alumni Association. This is some sweet, sweet stuff. So, Russ, if you got nothing else, take us out of here.
Yeah, whether you see us at the Joan, whether you see us at the Jack, or whether you see us at the Cam, no matter where you see us, we're going to be saying, go Herd.
Go Herd, it's the ThunderCast. Let's head down to Georgia and get a big old dub and come back in the first place in the Sun Belt East Division. We'll see you next week. Later.